Emily Phillips, and welcome again to another episode of Step to Stories, where we get engrossed in a fascinating story or interview while we get our steps on. Movement is so important, and a lot of times, again, we know that the elements outside make it to where we can't get our steps in. And so I really try to bring in people that can help us be better people or educate us or bring in a story that helps us get engrossed so that we can get our steps in. And today we have one of my favorite guests, and I like to bring him in as much as he has time, is Dr. Sydney Cohen. And today's topic is going to be receiving comfort. I really like this topic. I can talk about my own experience with that. I lost my brother a little bit over a year ago, August 31st of 2022. I remember during that time period, it was such a fog. And I remember just feeling like life was going in slow motion and so fast at the same time. As a matter of fact, today I was looking for something that I had in my hands during that time. And it was you don't realize what a fog you're in until you think about it later. Your emotions can get the best of you when you have such a tragic loss, especially a loss that is sudden. Not to say that a loss that is coming is not as difficult, but when something happens so suddenly, as it did with myself and my baby brother, so many things came up inside, and a lot of them, my body was trying to protect me. And during that time period, my tribe, my friends, family members, strangers tried to offer comfort. And I remember back then, and we'll get into this a little bit, but I remember back then, sometimes I just wanted somebody to listen. Sometimes I just wanted somebody to acknowledge how I was feeling. There were oftentimes people would say things, and they were trying to say the right things, but they would say something like, God has a reason for everything, or they would say certain things that were not helpful. Some of the most helpful things for us as a family during that time were people bringing food. I know that may sound crazy, but people just bringing food was super helpful. It was one less thing we had to worry about. It showed that people loved and cared for us. And also, I would say, just people talking about the person that you lost. I think a lot of people, and I think this would be a good episode to talk about not just how to receive comfort, but how to give comfort. Because I think sometimes people feel like it's really taboo to talk about a person that you've lost. But in actuality, that is what the griever wants. Like, we want to talk about them. We want you to think about them. We want you to remember them. And we're very, very mindful of who brings them up and who, I want people today to bring my brother up. And so anyway, I just remember that, there wasn't a whole lot anybody could do to change the way I felt, but there were times when I desperately needed comfort. I was very grateful for those who gave it to me. And I know there's a lot of people out there that have a hard time receiving it. So Dr. Cohen, thanks for coming on today. Tell us a little bit about you. I just read a post you did on Instagram. It says, this post is about you receiving comfort for any reason too, like when you're experiencing grief or trauma or anxiety, panic, or any major situational stress, with the emphasis here being on two possible types of comfort you can receive from outside you and inside you. So what does that mean? Talk to us about that.
Sure. Just one thing I wanted to say first, Emily, beside that, as we've talked enough times, I'm terribly sorry about the loss of your brother. I just want to quickly add, you and I think have also talked about this. A trauma is always worse when you're blindsided. Trauma is enough of a stress and a difficult thing to contend with in the first place. But if you're blindsided, it's always worse, psychologically and emotionally. So I'm extra sorry that you're even blindsided. Just wanted to say that, and I'll move from there. So, comfort. One of the things that I talk about in this post, but I want to certainly get into right now, and one of the things in a way you already are starting to allude to, Emily, comfort really is a kind of different strokes for different folks thing. Because what is comforting for one person may not be comforting for another person. And although, if I remember correctly, I don't know if I actually mentioned this in that post, but I'll certainly say it now. If, as a giver of comfort, you want to give comfort to someone who clearly needs it, either they're directly letting you know they need comfort, or you know them well enough to know they may be holding back, asking for comfort, they're reluctant to ask, but you know they need it and you want to give some comfort, rather than automatically assuming you know what type of comfort they need, you can ask, what do you need from me now? What type of comfort? Do you need comfort in words? Do you need a hug? Do you need us to take a walk together? What do you need for comfort? Because the fact is, as you were basically saying, different people can prefer different types of comfort. And as you're also basically saying, what type of comfort feels comforting at one time may not feel comforting that time, the next day, or whatever. So that's just a general thing about offering comfort, but sometimes it really pays to ask what the person needs, because then you can align with what they need, and it really is more likely it'll be what they need.
I would have asked you this question before it happened to me, but now that it's happened to me, I know a little bit. But I think a lot of times people don't really know what to do. I found it very interesting when I look back. Some of my dearest, closest friends, and I love them dearly, and no judgment. But I think it was so horrific and tragic that they almost not meaning to,
Mm-hmm.
but separated themselves from me a little bit. And
Mm-hmm.
it was so sad. And I think a lot of people don't like to be around sadness subconsciously. I actually found that strangers,
Mm-hmm.
people at the airport, people on Facebook that I didn't know personally, offered more comfort to me at the time. And it, again, not judging anybody, I think in some ways it was too much for my closest ones to bear, and they couldn't handle it. And I understand that, but boy, did I need them. And boy, do I remember some people that didn't show up at all.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, do I remember that. And I think the viewers should know too, if you've got someone close to you that has had a tragedy, and it is difficult, but if you are close to them, as difficult as it is, you have got to show up for them, whether that be come to the funeral, whether that be, if you can't come to the funeral, do something separate for them.
Mm-hmm.
you know Coming to a funeral is not about, in my opinion, coming to someone's funeral is not really about anything except for supporting the person that lost somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yes, you're going to respect the person that passed, but I'm sure you've gone to a close friend's father's funeral. You know what I mean? Like, you didn't maybe know the father that well, but you were there to support the person that lost,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm very mindful about funerals now too, that it's about just being there, just because people will remember.
Yeah, let me take this all another step, because what I think we're really both saying in a way here, Emily, is if you're not sure, well, let me go first to assume. What I think a lot of people do who are open to offering some kind of comfort is make the assumption that the kind of comfort they're going to offer is the quote right comfort or the best comfort. You can't necessarily assume that unless you know the person who's going through such a difficult time, who needs all that comfort, unless you know them really, really well. You can't automatically assume that you know what kind of comfort they need. Therefore, rather than assume and go ahead and offer a type of comfort that really may not be what they need, like I was saying before, it's such a compassionate, empathetic thing to ask them, to ask. Now, let me just take that one more step, though. Let's suppose now, in your shoes, Emily, that you're needing the comfort and it's being offered, at least by some people, in a way, like you're saying, that doesn't resonate for you. It doesn't fit for you. And yet, even in a sense, a bigger challenge for you, like you were saying, is some people kind of seem to be withdrawing, avoiding, whatever it is. One of the things then someone in your position, if you were willing, could do is gently ask the person at the right moment, is there something? Help me understand. Is there something coming up for you right now about offering me comfort that makes it hard? Because if there is, it would be so helpful to me to understand what's coming up, and then we can talk about it. That way, you get on the receiving end clarification of why the person seems to hold back, and the person who's holding back is given an opportunity to go within themselves, be a little bit mindful, see what's going on inside, and it may end up turning the tables for them, that by seeing what's coming up for them, it's too scary for them, it's too painful, it's triggering some of their own stuff, helping them face it themselves. Then you two are back creating a connected dialogue.
So, one of the things that I've been told is that I'm quite good, and I don't know if this is a good thing, but receiving help or asking for help. I'm very resourceful. So, it is very easy for me. And I think I learned this from my dad. He's always taught me, if you need to get something done, find somebody that's really good at that and let them help you get it done.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always been very good at asking for help in
Mm-hmm.
times of need. Do so many people have a hard time with that? And there's a lot of people that I've offered to help, but they'll say, "Oh, no, thank you. We're okay. Just, prayers would be good." Why do some people have a hard time accepting help?
Well, here's the deal on that one, Emily, that I'm going to start with. And I mentioned this in this Instagram post today. Not to get into a whole thing about it right now, but I come from a background, in all honesty, that's very different than yours. Growing up, I received very, very little comfort. And it's something that I wasn't really mindful of or cognizant of as I was growing up, was really a drawback. It was something that just wasn't part of my family upbringing. So, without consciously realizing it, I entered into adult life not the least bit inclined, frankly, to ask for comfort. If it was offered, I usually went with it, but even then, it was often difficult for me to accept it when it was offered. But rarely, if ever, did I initiate proactively reaching out for it. So, one of the variables that can be a factor, like I'm saying, at least for myself, and I do believe for enough other people, is the absence of getting comfort when you're growing up. And what that can also do, to just take that another step or two, is it can create a feeling or a belief inside, maybe not consciously, but subconsciously, that either you don't really deserve it, or it's somehow a sign of weakness. And there's other kind of judgments that go with weakness about asking for help. So as those judgments kind of accumulate inside, again, even if you're not conscious of them, then you can enter adult life and continue through adult life being very disinclined, almost outright avoidant of asking for help, because those kind of factors are still factors that keep you from reaching out.
What is the best way for somebody to ask for help?
Well, for someone, let's say like myself, I mean, I'm much less that way. I'm much more open to doing the asking for help than I ever used to be. It's still kind of a struggle at times, but at least there's more comfort than there used to be. Quite frankly, it actually becomes an act of courage. And I talk to my clients about this a lot, people in my personal life. I like to define courage. We all know the word courage. We all know courage is a great thing. I have this kind of working definition of courage. Anything you're reluctant or hesitant to do, but you make yourself or push yourself to do it anyway because you know it's in your best interest. Okay. It's a broad definition. Well, for someone like myself and anyone who may be listening now, or again, anybody I ever speak to in any context, who can relate to how difficult it feels, how reluctant it feels to ask for comfort, to go ahead and ask, is an act of courage. It fits the definition. It's something you're reluctant or hesitant to do, but you push yourself to do it anyway because you know it's in your best interest. It can be courageous to ask for help if that's not something that you grew up with, if it's not something that comes naturally.
So I want to get a little deeper into the psychology of all of this, because you are a psychologist. My major in college was psychology, so I'm fascinated with people.
Okay.
So let's talk about the opposite. I know myself sometimes, and I know others. Well, let's just take the woman who continues to marry a man that abuses her.
Hmm.
Okay, so what causes people to continue to attract people that are doing the opposite of comforting them? And so, for example, I've recently had to kind of cut ties with some sort of people that were a little bit toxic towards me that I didn't realize until I kind of sat back and thought. Somebody asked me a question today. They said, how do you know if somebody is toxic in your life? And my honest kind of school age girl answer was, if every time you're around them you feel bad
Hmm.
and you have a weird feeling inside and something doesn't feel right and your heart races in a bad way, that's toxic.
Yeah.
So why do we go back to that situation? Why do people do that?
Okay. Let me address that because this question comes up a lot. It comes up a lot in my work, comes up a lot on things I post. There's a big difference. First thing I want to say on this is a big difference between initially choosing someone who, quote, again, seems to be abusive versus staying with them. In the very beginning stage of any love relationship, yeah, you may get some clues that somebody does appear to at least be already abusive or at least have the potential to be. So, what really becomes the issue is the choice to continue to stay with them. I don't really look at it as it's almost kind of a cliche-ish thing. People attract abusers or something like that. I don't buy that. What I do buy is that there can be a chronic pattern of staying with abusers.
So
That,
you don't think there's any correlation of women who've been married 3 times to 3 alcoholics or 3 people that are verbally abusive? You don't think that there's something that they're inside them that's attracting you think that maybe they're not picking up on it?
yeah, I don't think it's again necessarily attracting. What I really think it is where I want to go with this, is about the word deserve.
Got it.
And that's a word that I think psychologically speaking is an extremely important word to look at. It's a word that often gets overused or misused because what I'm not talking about is something conscious. I'm not talking about a person consciously saying, I deserve to be with an alcoholic. I deserve to be with an abuser. What I'm getting at is the use of the word and the meaning of the word deserve from a subconscious standpoint, which brings in something I talk a lot about, the inner bully. Basically, then tying that together. If somebody continues to repeat the same pattern of being with somebody who is, let's stay with the general word toxic, whether it's in terms of alcohol, whether it's in terms of abuse, whatever, choosing over and over to stay with that type of person means that person's inner bully is continuing to make that person believe they don't deserve better. They don't deserve different. And what that goes hand in hand with, and what the inner bully also keeps alive and kicking inside that person, is, as you can imagine, low self esteem, low self worth, and low self respect. And as long as, like you used the word before, just kind of summed it up in the word bad. That's what toxic people do. They make you feel bad. The badness, if you will, is the low self worth, the low self esteem, and the belief deep down in your core saying, I'm not convinced I deserve better. I actually feel like I really don't deserve better. And then taking that even one more step, what a lot of people do on the receiving end of patterns of abuse is they manage to rationalize that somehow they still love the person and even the other person still loves them, that there's somehow still love there. And that rationalization obviously just makes it that much more toxic.
You know something, this is so fascinating, and it actually brings things up within myself. The times in my life where I've had like a low self-esteem, I would literally, out of all the people that I know that care about me and love me and want to see me do well, I would focus on the few people that didn't
Hmm.
and want them to like me and feel desperate for them to like me. And what a crazy thing when you have so many others who love you. Why would you not gravitate towards them? Why would you give the others a second thought? And it really took me a really long time, and I'm continuing to grow with it, because I think we all want people to like us. Like, we all want that, right? Like, we don't, none of us want people to not like us. Sorry, my alarm just went off.
Oh,
Apologize. Hold on a second.
sure.
I'll pause this. We'll let me get it to come up. Hold on. Okay, maybe that's a sign. We all want people to like us, but not everybody's going to like us, and that's okay. And it took me a long time, I think, to really like figure that out. I used to have friends that would be like, "Why do you care if like so and so doesn't like you? Like, you don't even barely know that person." Maybe if it was like your very best friend, or a loved one that's angry with you, that's one thing. But somebody that you don't know very much, I would actually hyper focus on people that I barely knew that did not like me. Why do you think I did that? Any like psychological thing behind that?
Yeah, it goes right back to deserve, Emily. It goes right back to deserve. If you're mired subconsciously in an inner bully, or call it inner critic, whatever, that has you believing, if not convinced, you don't deserve to be treated better. You may want to be treated better, and want versus deserve is a key distinction. Saying, I want to be treated better, I want to be liked, that's on the conscious level. Everyone basically can say that on a conscious level. But in contrast, on a subconscious level, where the inner bully is in power, where the inner bully reigns supreme, the inner bully can be saying, no, sorry, even if you want to be liked, even if you want to be appreciated, your inner bully, inner critic, say, nope, you don't deserve it. And I say that because I see as your inner bully, your self-esteem, self-worth, and all of that is pretty low. So your inner bully, want you to gravitate to people that may not necessarily like you as much as the people who do. By the way, one more thing I want to be sure to say on the subject of being liked. I think the subject of being liked sometimes is not emphasized as much. I'm sorry, I don't want to put it that way. That there's another subject that should be emphasized more than being liked, which is being respected. Too many people get caught up in the need to be liked, again, which is perfectly human. We all have a need to be liked. But I think what gets underestimated in its importance, gets under discussed in its importance, is the need to be respected, because there may be people that you just don't have the relationship with where they like you as much as you'd like, but you can still be respected by them.
Yes.
The need to be respected is really important too.
I wonder where that comes from. Is that just a human thing? Like, is that just something that we're born wanting to be respected?
I actually don't necessarily think so. I think the need to be liked and the need to please people is more of what's going on very early on, certainly in the first couple of years of life, and continues. I think life's experiences, where there's ways that you do things, the actions you take, the ways you treat people, those kinds of behaviors, as the years go by, will get reactions not just about being liked, but you're being respected for behaving that way. You're being respected for acting that way. And the older you get, the more the brain is capable of appreciating being respected, as separate from, because it is certainly possible to like someone and not necessarily respect them, and it is very
True.
possible to respect somebody and not necessarily like them. I mean,
You're right. There's people that I have different political views from or whatnot, but I certainly respect what they've accomplished in their life or the goals they set to accomplish. I feel like if we had more respect for people in our country, things would be a bit better. And it's really, you hit on something very interesting. It's not that It's not that the right and the left don't like each other so much, it's that they have zero respect for each other. And so that actually is probably what creates so many issues within just our government and our country and everything. There's no respect.
Yeah, let me take that one more step, even partly for time's sake. So, as we all know, and as enough people have very sadly experienced exactly what you're talking about across friends, within families, there has obviously been such a lack of respect. I'm not going to get into specifics. We all know what it's about. We won't get to details.
Right.
But I want to steer that a little bit off of that back onto comfort. Because what happens in these situations, I know I've experienced it myself, I've spoken to enough people, is when there's outright resentment and animosity that builds, when there's that loss of mutual respect, it becomes harder to turn to those very same people for comfort. It's as though comfort gets lost in the shuffle. And one of the things we're going to talk maybe a couple of minutes about at the very beginning of the show that I mentioned in that post about outer versus inner comfort.
Yes.
Let me just say something on that real quick. So the idea of outer comfort in the best of all possible worlds is someone outside of you. Maybe it could be even more than one person, but there's at least one person in your life that you know you can count on to comfort you. Enough people in this world have that, but plenty of people don't. So if you're someone that doesn't have anyone that you feel you can really count on for comfort, where you can still get some, I'm calling it outer comfort, can be from things like there are meditation apps that can be very comforting. There can be YouTube videos. There are people who go on YouTube. There are speakers who are very well-known speakers who have terrific compassion and comfort. And watching some of those YouTube videos can provide comfort. Those are a couple of examples of getting comfort from outside of you where it isn't necessarily a person. But what I also want to make sure to emphasize here is that piece of inner comfort. I have this little term I like to use, the idea of an inner comforter. I honestly believe we all need one. And the meaning of inner comforter is, again, back to different strokes, different folks kind of thing. So, for example, if somebody is, let's say, spiritual, not necessarily religious, but spiritual, an inner comforter idea can mean something like God, spirit, divine, universe, whatever term resonates. But inner comforter can come in other ways. Inner comforter can mean, for example, you go inside yourself and you picture a place that is very peaceful, very relaxing to be in. Could be particularly outdoors. When you picture and visualize that place, and at the same time, do some breath work. Do the kind of breath work that you know is a kind of soothing, peaceful breath work. Combine the breath work with a soothing, comforting visual image, and it's an example of an inner comforter. Doesn't involve a person, doesn't involve anything spiritual, but if it's comforting to you and it's within you, go to that inner comforter.
I know we're almost out of time. Ironically, it's always interesting before we meet I'll do something or something will happen and then you'll be talking about it and it comes up. I wanted to end on this note and go back to this respect thing. I keep going back to it because I feel like you've given me like an aha moment. It's not always about it's wanting respect.
Mm-hmm.
I was watching a documentary last night. I don't know if you remember, I'm sure you do, the singer Little Richard.
Sure.
And I was watching a documentary on him, and it's actually really fascinating. You should watch it. It's on Hulu. And I didn't know this, but he was technically, in many ways, the king of rock and roll,
Mm-hmm.
and was extraordinarily talented. But because of his sexuality and his race and many, many factors, he was never given any respect. And so what they would do is they would take his songs and they would have Elvis perform them or this other dude perform them. And he was never given respect. And he would literally cry on camera about this. Those were my songs. I'm the one that started rock and roll. And at the very end of the show, it showed him up on stage, one of his last times on stage, just saying to the audience, they had given him this award and finally had recognized, now that he's an old man. Obviously, he passed away in 2020, but it's you could just see. I don't even know that he cared so much about being liked. I don't know that he cared about being famous. I don't know that he cared about any of that. I think he just wanted to be respected.
Yes.
And I saw him on the stage, just like, finally, like, thank you. I mean, that's all he wanted. And it just hit me on this show today. Like, that is what people really want. It's not necessarily that I think they want to be liked. I think they want to be respected.
And just for time's sake,
Yeah, I know we got to go.
That the need for respect, I do believe, is under discussed. It is underestimated. It is more of what cuts into your heart and soul to feel respected. It's something, there isn't a joy to it. It's not a warm fuzzy, but it's more foundational than being liked.
I love it. Thank you so much. Dr. Cohen's going to be coming on with us once a month, hopefully more soon. But just for those that are watching, and Doctor, will you stay on with me once I hit the off recording? I wanted to ask you a question off camera. But if you want to get in touch with him, he's an amazing psychologist. He can really assist you with any issues that you're having, from, shame, guilt, PTSD, trauma, anything like that. He's fabulous. His prices are very reasonable. He can work with you virtually. I've worked with him. And how can they reach you?
So either an email, which would be, this is all lowercase with no spaces, drsidcohen @gmail, drsidcohen @gmail, or you can call me. I'll give you my phone number. You can call my office, 856-428-1685. Feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Well, it's such a pleasure to have you today. We discussed comfort, respect, which I didn't know we were going to talk about, but I actually think that's one of the things I'm going to name this show. If you guys have a topic that you want us to discuss on our next episode, just put it down below. I will also put a link below to how to get in touch with Dr. Cohen. Thank you so much for being with us today. I hope you guys got your steps in today. Thanks, Dr. Cohen.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, we'll talk soon. Bye, everybody.